In 2021, I collaborated with a Flutter engineer on a mobile project. He left the team after finishing its features. Guess what I discovered when I tried to test its module? That seemed to have issued a lot of warnings. He had set the initial value of a number of variables to null in his code implementations. Oops, this is a bad practice in that. Knowing how to use the language correctly, on the other hand, can save you and your team a lot of time and effort. Anyway, after that, I had to clean up the code base. Consider a few best practices to remember when writing that code. Let us start with null handling. If a variable in Dart is nullable, it is implicitly initialized to null by default. As a result, you never have to do this explicitly. Share is a simple implementation of the tuple from our function. It gives back an employee object. Assume you have two string literals that you want to join. You do not need to use a plus sign. Putting them next to each other is ideal. A good example is an alert message function that accepts a string, while that supports concatenation with a plus sign. Interpolation is a cleaner and shorter way to compose strings and values. This example shows how to combine several literals and values. Declaring constructors for a class is a task that every software engineer performs on every project. Let's take a look at some best practices to remember when creating constructors. In this sample code, I have to type some fields repeatedly, which is tedious. Here is a more efficient implementation with less code. Assume we want an empty constructor body. We can end the statement with a semicolon instead of opening and closing braces. Here is an example of how to define an empty constructor. One of the most widely used concepts in software development is asynchronous programming. That provides a number of language features to assist with this. In this example, a value of 0 is being set to a raw feature. You should avoid this as it complicates your code and increases its vulnerability to bugs and potential crashes. Let us take a look at some best practices. As shown here, using async or await syntax improves the readability of your async code. Even when the function isn't synchronous, it's easy to fall into the trap of using async indefinitely. As long as the behavior of your function does not change, avoid using await and async whenever possible. A function called fastest route is an example of a scenario. Because the behavior remains constant, this function can be executed without the use of an async. In the future, it may be difficult to support a codebase that lacks a clear coding communication pattern. Begin incorporating that best practices into your subsequent projects to ensure that your project stands the test of time.